All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to June's Open Hour. I'm really excited this month for the topic. It's one we've been going through for a long time and batting around a long time, and we're finally getting to dedicate an open hour to behind the code in public lab, so public lab web development. This has been a long time coming, and there's a lot of ideas and questions as to what we'll share and what we'll do. But essentially, we have an open hour. And welcome to June's open hour. I'm really excited this month for the topic. Okay. So if you're watching the call as well as being in the live call, it'll broadcast. So just try to mute if you're not talking, but then unmute to talk. So yeah, so there's been a lot of conversations about things that we could share, things that we could do in this time, but ultimately we've just kind of left it open to for everyone to share and collaborate and talk a little bit about public lab web development. So if you haven't joined us in the live call and you'd like to, we have some spots still. There's a link on the open call. And you can join us here on the live call, or alternatively, you can log into the chat and submit questions or comments in the chat, and I'll feed them into the live call. So I guess if we get started, I'd love to have introductions for people who are with us on the live call. And I'll start on my left. So Brian, do you want to say a few words?
Hi, I'm Brian. I've been working with Public Lab since I think 2012, 2011, somewhere around there. I started out packing kits into boxes for Public Lab. I moved on to doing some web development for publiclab.org. And then I did a little bit of IT work with supporting some of the other IT staff. And then these days I just answer web@publiclab.org. That's basically all I do.
Cool, thanks, Brian. Gerald, you're next on my list. Hey. Oh, you're muted. Gerald, you're muted.
How about now?
That's better.
Good. Hey, everyone. I'm Gerald. I'm from Houma, Louisiana. I'm an engineer and software developer. I'm working with a civil engineering firm right now. I've done some stuff with Public Lab with the balloons and kites and stuff, and I've been sort of threatening to get involved in development, and my time is sort of freed up a bit more, so I'm here to learn and to see what's on the roadmap. Okay? Thanks.
Jeff?
Hey, I'm Jeff. I'm a contributor to most of Public Lab's code bases, and it's actually, since I'm a staff member, I get to spend large blocks of my time on it, which is great. And I'm not sure what else I can add to it at this point, but I'm glad to see you all here. I'm very eager for other people to code on Public Lab code bases.
Justin?
Hey, my name's Justin. I first got involved with Public Lab over this past summer as part of Google Summer of Code. I was working on the MapKnitter code base. And I've stayed involved with Public Lab in kind of little ways over this year, working on other aspects of the MapKnitter code base. More recently, I've been working on a kind of simple web app here in Chicago with Chai Hack Night, focusing on the Petco issues on the south side.
Cool. Kate?
Hi, I'm Kate Chapman. I am a long-time fan of public labs. I've worked on a project where we forked the MapMill code during Hurricane Sandy to sort photos for the Civil Air Patrol. I thought I'd come today and see what was up with the web development, since I mostly just lurk on the mailing lists.
Cool. Thanks, Kate. Liz?
Hey guys, this is Liz. I'm in Brooklyn, New York, and I'm on the web working group, and I'm really excited for this call.
Great, thanks. And I guess just to get started, I'd love if, I know everybody here has done a little bit of thinking about working with web development in Public Lab, or has been involved with it, or hasn't quite gotten started. And maybe if people who have contributed a little bit before can fill us in a little bit about how we collaborate through the web working group and ways that we sort of tackle web development issues. That would be great.
Brian, you want to talk about the web group?
I was 1 second. I was 1 second from saying I nominate Jeff.
You've been nominated.
You just beat me. Oh, all right. What did you want me to talk about?
A little bit about how people collaborate on web development in Public Lab.
So I think GitHub is probably the standard point where we have issues, GitHub issues, and issues is just what's wrong, what would be better. Issues are something that anyone can help with, whether they're developers or users. And I think using GitHub allows us to have, as developers, have a dialogue with our users. Occasionally, though, users will fill out forms that I don't know where they go, but somehow Jeff gets them, and he'll forward them on to us or make issues from those. Other people will email web@publiclab.org. And all of this stuff eventually filters into GitHub as issues. So once it's there, developers are pretty free to surf the issues, read the problems, join the discussions. A lot of times they'll have very long discussion threads. That's a kitten. We'll have very, very long discussion threads and issues. And unfortunately, Jeff ends up being the one who does almost all of the work, and I really don't help besides, hopping into issues and saying, oh, this would be a good algorithmic solution, or maybe you could clean this up here, or something like this. But I haven't actually been helping with the code base in a long time. So if you're a new programmer, maybe you're working your way through a computer science degree, or you're looking to get into computer science, I think the issues have some really great discussions of what would be a good way to implement it, but then someone actually has to implement it. And so people who are looking to get into this world should feel free to just try implementing some of these things that we're talking about in issues, follow the discussion, feel free to ask questions. And if you bump into problems, share that code and we'll see what we can do to help you, because it's far easier to verify code someone has already written than actually write it. So the people who actually get out there and put that code out there, even if it's totally wrong, have gone a lot further than I certainly ever do with just my discussions and the issues. I'll turn it over to Jeff for follow-up.
Yeah, I think Brian captured it pretty well. Like, one thing we think about a lot is that a lot of Public Lab community members are not coders, and that's a little atypical for an open source community. And we have a very high proportion of people who are doing work in the field, working with actual pollution, people who know about a specific problem, people who are community organizers, all sorts of different folks. But that means that because even just creating a GitHub account and knowing what GitHub issues are is a little obscure to non-coders. We've tried to create other ways that people can sort of get on, brought into those discussions and sort of meet in the middle. So the mysterious form that Brian talks about is one that I have struggled with a lot. It's just a Google form that goes to a Google spreadsheet. And I swear I have broken Google's spreadsheet API trying to get it to forward to the web working group, and it doesn't work. So I just manually copy it and paste it every single time an issue comes in on that. And the thought there is that you don't need to create a login to submit to the form. And so far, I haven't found another way that's really simple for someone who doesn't have a login to post an issue. And I've tried like multiple times. So if you can solve that problem, that'd be great. I tried like if this then that. I've tried all sorts of things, but not that many people use it. Or it doesn't come up that often, so it's not a big deal. And we encourage people to just email web@publiclab.org, which is sort of our like, I guess, sort of help desk, and that, you know, Brian, as I was saying, is sort of a champion on that list, because people will show up and say, hey, this isn't working, or hey, what if it could do this, whether it's a bug or a feature request, and Brian and other people on that list, but primarily Brian, will help frame that into a clear, well-described issue in GitHub, and then, you know, it gets put in the queue, and if lots of people agree that that's a good idea or it's an important bug to fix, then it does actually eventually get fixed. But, you know, basically we're sort of struggling with a pretty low capacity to fix things, and we have, you know, 4 or 5 major code bases with some thousands of users on them. And yeah, maybe I can put Justin on the spot, because he's made a really great push for you know, making the onboarding for new code contributors much smoother, and you know, sort of was one of the instigators of the movement to really revamp the installation process of all of the public cloud code bases, not just from a perspective like that it's functionally better to do that, but specifically framing that as a community outreach priority. And so now I think MapKnitter, publiclab.org, and Spectral Workbench can all be installed in about 10 minutes. And there's like an install video for one of them, and they all are using relatively up-to-date standards of installation. And I mean, we're not in a situation where like we had been a couple of Summer of Codes ago where like I remember one student like worked for several days to install Spectral Workbench. So hopefully that doesn't happen anymore. But I also think we're lucky that we've had the ability to focus on those kinds of priorities as well, and to get as far as we have. So thank you, Justin. And you're on the spot.
Can you clarify a little bit when you say install Spectral Workbench?
Oh, like, sure. Yeah, so I mean, almost all of our software is web-based, and that's for a variety of reasons, which we don't have to get into right now, but that means that to use it, you don't have to install it. And so most users are just going to the website and using it, or almost all users. And to develop it, you have to make a copy of it run on your own machine. And that process, because desktop computers aren't always set up the same way as a server might be, it can take a few extra steps. And but that's something that we've really put a huge amount of effort into making straightforward. So if you have, especially if you have a Linux machine, but also I think if you have a Mac, and in some cases even Windows, it's possible to install these. But if yeah, so that means you basically have a copy of the website running on your computer, and then you can mess with it.
Oh, great.
Yeah, Jeff has done some really great work over the past few months, getting those code bases able to kind of take on new contributors, and that's something that I've been thinking a lot about over the past few months. I think in a way, so that's one of the hurdles to getting new contributors involved, is just how easy is it to dive into the code base at the very beginning. Another thing that we've been working on is testing. Basically having automated tests that can so you make a change to the code base, the test can run, and they'll tell you if you broke anything. Up until recently, we haven't really had a lot of automated tests on most of the public lab code bases, and that can be a little bit tough for newcomers, because you can change something in one place and it may look right to you, but because you're not familiar with the entire code base, and many of these code bases are not huge, but they become pretty big, because MapKnitter and publiclab.org and these other sites are trying to do a lot of different kinds of things, especially publiclab.org. And so it's hard to know whether a change that you're making in one place might break something else. So testing is another thing that we've been adding. A third thing that I've been thinking about, so I've been working recently over the past month or so on a compiler for a language called Elm, which is a language for doing web development. And Elm has this really nice page that is just a collection of places for people to get started, like a collection of projects that or features that haven't been added yet, or things that need to be fixed, and like a paragraph about each of them. And so it's a different approach than a GitHub issue, which is like, hey man, here's this little piece of code that's broken, or here's this thing that doesn't work, and like I want to fix it right away, and like kind of what's GitHub issues are very kind of task oriented, and it can be difficult also for new folks to kind of come in through that door, because GitHub issues are so focused, it can be hard to orient yourself within the code base, or like figure out what is maybe a bigger project to take on. So we've made some really big strides over the past few months in opening up these different ways for new contributors to get involved. So yeah, let's like have some discussion about that.
Right. So is that, does somebody want to respond to Justin a little bit on that, or this might come
most
out?
of that work, by the way, has been Jeff. So big thanks to Jeff for all that work.
Well, thanks for the push, Justin.
I guess one of the things that, and this is sort of related in terms of, Justin, what you were thinking about recently and onboarding people and through GitHub, but and I feel like that's something that you've tackled a lot recently, and I guess I'm looking for a little bit more, I'm interested in hearing what are some of the projects that that Public Lab Web Development Group has been working on or has tackled, and then what are some of the things that in the future we're looking to get into or address?
Just really quick here, I think something that Justin was talking about with respect to having paragraphs and how to get involved without necessarily getting inundated with everything that GitHub has, it might be a good time to bring up the developer wiki page.
Perfect.
As a resource.
Yeah, so one of the things I'll do here is if you, I see people are posting in links on the IRC chat page and on the chat page that we have for the Google Hangout. Go ahead and post them in, and then once the open hour is over, I will put them all on the open hour page as well. So anything that's useful in that way, and especially the web developers page. Yeah. Did you want to talk a little bit about some of the changes that have happened there, on the ways that people have been onboarding, and the trends that you've seen, what's been useful, and where are people coming from?
Well, I think that's going to be a question for Jeff, but my impression is that outside of Google Summer of Code, we haven't seen very much onboarding, at least definitely not for publiclab.org. And we'd love to see a lot more, and we'd love to get feedback if you've even tried it and failed or wanted to throw everything in the trash. It would be great to know why. We'd love that feedback.
I think we have seen actually there was just a big contribution a few weeks ago that was sort of interesting and made me think about different sorts of new contributors. So in infogram.org, which we don't really have a lot of capacity to code on, so we don't really do much, I mean, on staff anyway, we don't really spend a lot of time on that. I guess we have sort of enough other projects going and so forth. But we'd very much like to. But there were a couple outstanding bugs that we just really didn't have the capacity to go around and fix, and they weren't like complete showstoppers. There were known workarounds. There was one where like you upload an image, and if it has punctuation in it or a space in it, then the save, it would say like save like 1%, 5%. It would go up to 100%, but actually really quickly go to like 20,000%. People were like, 20,000% saved. And the fix is just to like rename your file, and we just hadn't gotten around to fixing it. And then someone named Paul Dib or Deeb showed up. Never heard who he was before. Don't know where he came from or how he heard about Public Lab. And fixed 4 outstanding issues, including the upload bug and another major bug. Referenced them in pull requests really clearly, very legible contributions that were mergeable immediately, and it was just like, okay, done. Like, I tested them and it works. Thank you so much, you know. And that's happened a few times in the past where someone has wandered in and done a really substantial amount of work to fix a few bugs. In fact, the whole WebGL version of Infogram, which runs, you know, like 10 or 20 times faster than the regular version, was written by someone named Piotr Foltin. And we don't know, I don't know who Piotr is or where he is or how or why he began contributing, but he basically rewrote the core imaging. I assume Piotr's but yeah, true. We don't know. No, you're right. And I think like, so Piotr rewrote the entire core imaging pipeline of Infogram in WebGL, which is crazy. I mean, it's really crazy and it's wonderful. It completely transforms that, so you can do it in live video now. I mean, it's fast enough that you can literally be doing multispectral compositing on the fly at full frame rate video, and it's really amazing. And even responded when we said, hey, could we make this so that people can switch between the 2 modes? And he was like, yeah, okay, and then did that too, and then disappeared. And so there's two examples where someone has come in and done just really incredible work, and then we don't really hear much from them again. And, you know, it's not that we're not trying. We say thank you, like, you know, what brought you here? You know, trying to start a discussion or something. And previously, I had thought that was a little bit like, oh man, I guess we've sort of failed to engage these really amazing contributors. Bummer. But more recently, I've been wondering, you know, in Wikipedia, people say, well, Wikipedia is made up of many different kinds of contributors. Some contributors write stubs of articles, just outline them. Other people come in and they flesh it out with some really deeper research. Some people come in and they mark it. Oh, you need to add attributions. We need to cite things. Some people come in and change the grammar and fix and proofread. And some people interlink pages. And some people just cause trouble, and that's useful too. And like, maybe that's a good, and early in Wikipedia there was a lot of discussion and sort of rhetoric about Wikipedia. A project like Wikipedia needs all those different kinds of contributors. And so my thought was that perhaps folks like Piotr and Paul Dib are sort of, their mode is to float between a bunch of projects and solve outstanding issues that they can dive deep in on in a very focused way, and they're not going to stay around. It's not a lost opportunity, perhaps. Maybe that's just the way that they do it. And so if we want their kind of contributions, we have to be set up in such a way that they can quickly get in, fix it, and wander off. And we'll just get a lot of that sort of people. And that's a distinct type of contribution from the type where we have a long relationship with someone who works over a very long period of time on lots of different issues. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, it's sort of, it's hard to say. We don't have a huge sample size, mm-hmm. But yeah, it was just something that had been going through my mind recently about that sort of contribution. I'm still going to try to get Paul Dib to talk to us, but we'll see.
I think that concept of someone who just shows up, fixes something, and then departs like a ninja is actually fairly common in open source. And having, you know, some of the work that Justin's been motivating us to do is to help those type of people get involved very quickly, pick up the project, start working on it, fix a few things, and then go do whatever else they were going to do next. And as Jeff was talking, I remembered we should make a shout out to Sir Mac, who did a whole bunch of stuff for publiclab.org. He was there all of a sudden. He was talking in issues, solving stuff, and then he was gone. And we miss him, but you know, what he did was amazing while he was there.
I do have a bunch of viewers here who aren't on the live call. So, Sir Mac, if you're out there. Great. So, I guess this is maybe a good time then talk a little bit about some of the projects that people have been working on recently or that you'd like to work on. Point us out, those of us who maybe are new to Public Lab or new to looking for new development features on Public Lab, some of the things that have been going on recently.
You want to point at someone?
Sure. Yeah, you.
Well, I just wrote a little roundup of some of the things that relate to recent development. We had a bunch of projects that had been largely completed over last summer, or like partially completed over last summer, and then integrated in the fall, and then sort of tested and reintegrated and reworked in the winter, and then slowly sort of simmered over the spring, and finally a lot of them just come online over the past 4 or 5 months, and one of them in particular was this GPS auto placement, which is pretty exciting. It's based on Vinod's work over the past summer. Justin did some great integration work on it, and then basically we had an early version where in MapKnitter you drag an image in, and then it can just plop it on the map based on the GPS coordinates that are in the metadata, if you had a camera or a smartphone that had GPS on it. So that was cool, but we were sort of like, well, the real kicker would be if we could figure out the orientation with the compass data, and if we could get the altitude so we know how big it should be. And all those things just sort of came together all of a sudden 2 weeks ago, and we posted that, and it happened to line up really, really nicely. Here, I'm going to post it into the other chat as well. With work that's being done on the Open Imaging Network, Open Aerial Map, and Open Drone Map, in the sense of a lot of work is happening in this space all at once, and so I don't know. It looks like there's going to be some pretty interesting discussions at State of the Map this week or this coming weekend, I think, and other places about where these different projects might be able to collaborate. The other thing, just to touch on that, was one of the major architectural reasons for developing a new plugin to do image distortion in MapKnitter was by basing it on the Leaflet platform and making it a standalone plugin rather than a completely integrated part of MapKnitter. We're really hoping that other people out there who want to do images over maps will reuse that plugin and contribute and fix bugs on that plugin, and we can share the responsibility for maintaining and improving it because it serves many purposes, one of which is MapKnitter. So I think that's a strategy we could probably employ in other places, whether adopting an existing library, as Brian has often recommended we do, or just in modularizing something that one of our pieces of software does so that it's useful to other people outside of this context of our own work.
Cool. And Liz is pointing out here that we had gone through introductions, but we have at least one new addition here on the live call. So, Charles, are you on and available to speak, or do you have a microphone? You want to introduce yourself and say what brought you here?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm not exactly sure what you want me to say. I've sort of been lurking on the dev list for a while. I've known about Public Labs for a couple of years now, actually. I used to work at World Wildlife Fund and was on a project and in touch with like Jeffrey and Shannon. Now I'm doing, I'm just getting into web development, and I thought I knew about public labs. I thought some of the projects were interesting, and I wanted to try to help out. And I was trying to help out with the main website, Plots 2, and over the course of the last few months had been having trouble getting started with installation and things like that. I'm not sure if that's the kind of thing to reach out for, how much help you guys have for that. I try to do most of the things. I got some stuff fixed, but still have some trouble with getting the databases set up correctly. I would love to help out on the other stuff also, but I wanted to start with the website first, and I figured if there's a hiccup with me getting started on the website part, then I don't know, the other stuff might go slower.
No, it's a great place to start. It's maybe MapKnitter would be easier to get up and running because there's been so much more attention given to MapKnitter to get it running on your local machine if that's something you're interested in working on. But if you're having issues with Plots 2, getting that up and running, you should definitely email the developer list and feel free to make issues on GitHub and so on and so forth. We're more than happy to help you get it up and running. And it also tells us what we need to do to make it easier for people like you to actually get it running in the first place.
Also, that's a great opportunity to maybe file an issue on GitHub, on the Plots 2 GitHub, because if you're having issues getting the publiclab.org website up and running on your machine, then it's likely that other folks will have those issues too. And so, I mean, that in itself could be a great contribution, like just fixing those installation issues.
Okay.
Cool. Thanks for jumping on.
No worries. I'm glad you guys are welcoming and happy to help. I just didn't, without any previous contact, I didn't feel as comfortable reaching out for help.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why we're so excited to host this call. It's like, actually, what is, the question of what is keeping people from jumping on and adding, and if it's like a download issue, or is it just like actually saying hello to the group of people who are on the web development Google group. Hearing those things is exciting for us, because then we can start saying like, hey, if we do this or that, it'll make it easier for people to start contributing. So thanks.
Thank you.
And I think we have another Amir. Is that how you say your name? I think you're muted right now. If you're talking, I'm not sure. Okay. We can't hear you, but if you unmute, we can get back to you if you're available. If not, glad you're here. Thanks for joining. And then I have another one on here, Nola.
Hi, it's Groundwork New Orleans. I'm kind of new. I just started a year ago, so we've been doing some mapping, and I don't know anything about it, so I'm probably just going to sit back and listen and kind of get comfortable with the language.
Cool. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Right.
Would it be worth doing something like this for each of our projects? I mean, right now this is sort of just a general call for developers and so forth, but should we pursue doing more of these, focusing on, say, MapKnitter, or focusing on the main public lab website?
Yeah,
That's a general question to everybody.
If we wanted to do a deeper dive into one of them, maybe publiclab.org or MapKnitter, one of the two. Maybe it would be a good idea to schedule one for MapKnitter, since there's a lot of discussion about doing interoperability with some of these other software platforms out there. But yeah, no, I like the idea.
And we have in the chat here, we have a +1 from Gerald, and for those of us who are watching and aren't in the chat here, we have Amar chiming in that the PC is half dead, but they're going to try to get on soon. So no worries. But maybe is it an in-person thing that people would walk through together to sort of get it up on computers and get it up and running, or is it like a video that would be useful to put together of like how you walk through being introduced to MapKnitter or Plots2 or like Justin, I know you've kind of been doing this a little bit just through research notes, but what would be the most useful? How about as a newcomer? Is it like having an in-person get-together to get started, or would watching a video, is it more troubleshooting issues?
Who are you talking to?
Maybe, Charles, you mentioned that you've had this problem a little bit.
I think that Jeff has actually put together a video that is maybe something like what you're talking about for MapKnitter. Is that right, Jeff? I remember you did a video on MapKnitter recently. Oh, Jeff.
And we have
His
Kate
face is frozen. I think he might not be here.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think that Jeff did put together a tutorial for MapKnitter recently, but it sounds like, and you can either confirm or deny this, Charles, but it sounds like maybe there is some additional kind of value in having a face-to-face with people who can say like, oh man, here's the issue that I'm having that no one else seems to be having. Like, what do you think it is? So maybe.
Yeah, I think that would actually help out a lot. I looked through that video that you're referencing, and I tried to follow all of the directions, and I had to go back a little bit. I tried to start out with Postgres for Plots2, and then because I hadn't really used MySQL for Ruby on Rails before, and then went back and tried to do it with MySQL, and like I don't need to get into all the issues, but like basically like there are things that came up that I don't know if there are problems with the MySQL setup or something else going on, and it would be definitely great to know that when I'm trying to do it, or there's a time that people are going to be able to help at some point work through it, because sometimes the messaging back and forth isn't always as fast as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Kate, do you want to talk a little bit about what you've written in here about a live tour? Okay. Kate, are you available? I think we might have lost her as well. Kate?
She said she's having problems unmuting in the chat.
I see. Okay, well, if you want to type in, so Kate wrote in a live code tour might be useful. And if you want to type in anything else, I'm happy to read it for you. Sorry you're having trouble. Great. So, yeah, actually, this is kind of funny because the next question I had were what were the major challenges of working with a web development group? So obviously, we're talking a little bit about getting started and uploading and figuring out where to start when you first come. That's obviously a challenge. But working with the web development group, what are some of the other challenges that you see in contributing in your time here with Public Lab? And maybe, do you want to go, Justin? Oh, I think you're muted. Sorry.
You're right. Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I think for me, really the toughest thing was getting started. Yeah, so
Sorry.
Getting started was kind of the rockiest, and now that I have some familiarity with a bunch of the different code bases, there are long periods of time when I won't contribute anything because I'm too busy with other stuff. But I'm able to then like jump back in a couple months later and make some contributions somewhere else. Is that helpful?
Yeah. And I know, Kate, you just jumped off and back on, but Kate typed in just time to ask questions live and point out the details of a specific project. So that's what Kate was talking a little bit about the live tour.
I think that would have to be Jeff, maybe Justin, if someone wanted to actually run through, like right here, right now, on your system, like what do you do to turn it on? But to actually get it set up in the first place, like bootstrapping, I think that might be a bit too long and too involved to do right now as a live tour. But just to show like what it looks like when it's even running on your local system, I think that's something we could do right here and right now.
I mean, there are two things, right? One is like, okay, how do I get this website up and running? Like, how do I connect the database? How do I, install the dependencies? When this is not so much an issue anymore, probably, but it used to be difficult with MapKnitter because you had to install all of the dependencies yourself. So like all of the other software libraries and packages that it depended on, and sometimes there would be conflicts. Like one would say, oh, I need more, greater than version 1. And another dependency would say, I can't do anything above version 1. And you would have to resolve that kind of stuff yourself. That's all done automatically now because of the work that Jeff has done. But that's one component of it. Another component is, okay, I've got it installed, I've got it running. How do I now orient myself within the code base and know that if there's this feature that I'm interested in working in, where does the code for that live? And that's not always easy to figure out. So I think that there are two components. I'm curious, Kate, is there a video or an example that you're thinking of that is kind of inspiring this? If you could like post that link, or if there's something that you're thinking of, then I'd love to see that.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever seen one that's virtual. I've been to bar camps where there's been a walkthrough of various projects, and exactly what you're talking about, where knowing where the features are sit can be really helpful. Just because there's different styles of developing a web project, and and not everyone can just jump in and instantly figure that out.
So I wonder if what you're describing might be helpful, coupled with something like what I posted, that Elm projects page. So like if we had a little paragraph saying, here's this feature that we're interested in adding, here's what it would involve, and then coupled with that there was a little tour or something that would say, here are the 5 like files in the code base. Maybe they're scattered in a bunch of different places, but here are all these different entry points that you might want to look at in order to get started, because these are places where different components of this feature are living in the code base.
Yeah,
I think that could help.
I think it's too hard to say, like, make a map through the code of where all the features live. I've never really seen this done, unless you're talking about a very minimal project. As you have more and more features, they start to spread out. But more in regards to what Justin's talking about, where maybe there's a problem with a feature, or there's a new feature that's desired. Something I do, because I am too lazy to actually write the code these days, I actually do read through the source code, because I do know my way around the source code. And I will highlight regions of code, and I say, the problem is here. Mm-hmm. It is related to, and then I do a highlight code here. Mm-hmm. So I'm extremely verbose in my issues. So if you start looking for BT Bonval in GitHub on Public Lab, you'll probably find way more information than you can use. But I do try to normally near the top, especially when I create an issue, have a walkthrough of here's where the code's running, all the pieces of code that are interacting to either create the problem or where the solution would most likely touch throughout. And I've made that a standard practice, mostly because I'm doing my best to help people who are coming on who are actually going to do the real work, and I'm just sort of putting a flashlight there, because I have to admit I'm super lazy, and for me, I don't have a problem going through the code and giving the highlight tour for this feature, but to actually sit and write it can be torturous for me.
And one thing that's really great about GitHub in this respect is that you can link to specific lines in a specific file in the code base. And so you can say, here's this feature, and here are a bunch of links, and you click on the link, and it takes you to this file really deep in the code base, and it scrolls the page to these 5 lines that you've highlighted. And so that could be one way of maybe providing a really really selective window into the code base.
One of the questions I have, outside of people who would be contributing to the code base, and Justin, you brought this up when we were first talking about having this call, is how can people who aren't necessarily have a background in web development but are still interested in contributing work with the web development in a productive way? Or how can people who aren't in the web development team work and contribute?
So this is actually something that I've been thinking about and working with at Chai Hack Night, so kind of like meetup here in Chicago as well. There are a couple of us who have been working on an app to alert people in residents in South Shore in Chicago who live near these big Petco piles, to alert these residents when there are high winds that's gonna blow the Petco around. And so I've been working on it a little bit. There's another developer who's really spearheaded the effort, but there are a lot of non-technical folks who show up to this meetup every week. In fact, it's maybe 50-50 or so. And a lot of these folks have come over to our group and said, like, hey, how can we get involved? I'm interested in working on this, but I don't know how to code. And one guy who's gotten involved, which I think has been really successful, has been he's a medical student at UIC, and he said, I don't know how to code, but I can do some research into this issue, and I can help you develop the content. And so we've kind of wanted to be able to say things like, here is a threshold for wind, and maybe it's 10 miles an hour, maybe it's 15 miles an hour, and here's why it's dangerous, here's why we're highlighting it, and can we like link to something in the medical literature or link to something on the EPA's website. And so he created a GitHub account, and he's been kind of posting the stuff on GitHub and been really active in the comments. Hasn't contributed any code, but has been a really significant contributor to the project because of what he's been able to contribute alongside the code.
So when we talk about people contributing to GitHub, what does that exactly look like for someone who's new to this world of contributing to online development?
Yeah.
Shall we screen share and actually show GitHub?
Yeah, I think that's a great
idea. You want to screen share?
So I can do a screen share. Let me see. How do I do it?
It's the green button?
Yeah. So I can do it. I'll do this. So I'll just take you guys actually to the project that I was just talking about, the Petco project. So this is GitHub right here. It's basically like a website for sharing code and for kind of publishing the code that powers software in an open way. This is a project that we've been working on in terms of Petco. Here's where the code lives, and this is where on the right side where some other kind of like functionalities live. There's a wiki. Sometimes people will fill out the wiki with maybe documentation about the software, but also other things. And issues is something that we at Public Lab use really heavily right here. And so there are just like some examples here of issues that folks have filed that are maybe not so technical. Like Derek has opened a bunch of issues here saying like, hey guys, this is great, but can you maybe clarify the language a little bit more? Like, I don't know what these things mean. Another issue from Derek. This is Jason, the guy who's kind of a really great non-technical contributor, and he's kind of chiming in here and saying, like, this stuff is great. Here are some resources, and so that's been a really great way that he's been able to contribute. Is there anything else that would be helpful for me to show right now?
There's some discussion going on in the IRC chat about particular public lab issues.
Yeah.
One that was just filed. Jeff and Brian, do you want to chime in a little bit?
Maybe someone else wants to share their screen for this?
Sure, I can screen share. I noticed that, you know, when the call, like 10 minutes into the call, Benjamin Sugar, whose GitHub name is Skillfully Curled, posted a couple issues about MapKnitter. I'm trying to screen share, but it just doesn't seem to. The button doesn't actually even do anything. It's weird.
The green?
Yeah.
Jeff, check for a pop-up behind the window. It might be popping up somewhere and saying, "What do you want to share?"
Maybe I need to like enable pop-ups or something.
That could be also.
Yeah, not getting it. That's weird.
If you move your Hangout page, is it behind it?
No. Does someone else want to just screen share that link that I posted? While I.
Yeah, I can. Am I unmuted? Yeah. Let me try and do this. Apologies for being unmuted while Kat was going crazy. Yeah.
Crazy cats are also part of the public lab community.
All right, screen sharing, upload.
Yeah, there you go. So there's Skillfully Curled, which is Benjamin Sugar's name. Click on Brian's to see the screen share. You know, he says when you upload images, there aren't any images. Only when there aren't any images already, they don't appear in the Images tab until you refresh your browser window. After refreshing, they do appear. And he very helpfully mentions which browsers he's using, and he's tested it on 2 different browsers. And just now, so you see that was 43 minutes ago, and just now I just quickly responded because I know Matthew Lippincott had sort of a similar sounding issue where the GPS button didn't show up, but it did once he refreshed. So I just wanted to know if they're related, and maybe there's some weird JavaScript thing where it's not updating both the pop-up and the sidebar at the same time, or so it's going to take probably a little more digging to see whether they're the same issue, or whether they're at least related, or whether they're independent. But you start to weave these things together and to get a better sense of the context. But a lot of the initial discussions are just, what were you doing when it happened? Do you have the image you tried to upload, if that might have been relevant? In this case, I don't think it was. Can you attach a screenshot? That's a really useful way, because then you can often see the URL they were at, or whether they're logged in and things like that. That's really helpful, because a lot of the initial conversation is just trying to figure out, really clearly describe what the problem was, and when and how it happened. And I think, to echo some of what Justin was saying, that kind of contribution is almost more important than actually writing any code at all, because non-coding contributions are the heart of producing good software. They define what's wrong, or what even before you begin writing code. In a lot of cases, they'll describe what functions should exist in the future. And so I think it's the burden's on us, to make sure that people wandering into our code bases and so forth, or into our community, really feel like this kind of contribution, this kind of hey, I don't know if this is the way it's supposed to go, or I don't know if this is working correctly, or whatever. That's not just sort of complaining or sort of helping out. That's actually in a lot of ways, I think it's the most important part of producing software. Because absent that, it's just like some people who know how to programming for nobody, you know. And so I think often like bug reporting and the discussions around them can sort of seem like extra or on the side, or sort of people who are doing those things don't necessarily feel like they're at the heart of the development process, but they really are.
Yeah. So we're getting close here to the hour, and there are a couple things that I wanted to reference before anybody jumps off. But just that we've been talking a lot about the web development Google group, and that's specifically, is it web public plots? Jeff, what's the address for it?
If you go to publiclab.org/wiki/developers, you'll see it. I'll put a link in the chat. And the group is called plots-dev, like Public Lab for Open Technology and Science-developers. But it's linked to from this page. Okay,
great. And the other thing I wanted to highlight was that Jeff's been doing a really awesome job the past, I think, 2 months now of putting together a monthly web report, which is highlighting a lot of the issues that have been opened or closed over the past month, and the work that has been done. So if you're looking to sort of get a pulse on things that are going on in the Public Lab, web development community, that's a great place to start and get an idea about some of the things that are going on. And Jeff, you send that out to the web development working group, and who else can get that, or how do you get that? You're muted, sorry.
I'm pasting in links to that too. I'm sorry, I pasted the wrong link first, so just click the second link.
Okay.
And I can actually just fix both. I can just tag both of them. Because that's how tagging works. But yeah, I've been doing it monthly, or trying to do it monthly. Actually, that link doesn't go to either of them. I guess I haven't been tagging it with Web Working Group, but I will do that now. So both of those links will work within the next 3 minutes.
Okay.
But yeah, basically it's a roundup of everything that's happened in the past month's worth of contributions. And what's nice is actually we use the GitHub Pulse system to look at contributions, and so one of the things I mentioned is how many people contributed to each of the projects in that period, in that month.
Did anybody else have? I'll leave it open past the hour if anybody wants to hang out and chat. But just some final thoughts or questions before we close the hour.
I guess like the final thoughts that I'm having are that we've talked about a couple of things that maybe would help. Hey.
Bean.
That would help get folks on board. So we've talked about maybe extra videos, maybe a listing of what kind of features or issues there are that people could help with. And so I think for me the next question is which of those avenues is going to be the best use of everyone's time now? So like which of those avenues can we pursue to help folks get involved that is going to kind of potentially make a difference and be an efficient use of especially Jeff and Brian's time, since I know that they've put in so much time on this stuff.
I have a quick final remark, which is if you're trying to get involved in this and you don't know the best way to reach out, because there are so many, you have two options. Both are pretty much email. One is email web@publiclab.org, and that'll go to me. I frequently get emails there where I have to then figure out where that should actually go, whether there's a 1 or 3 or 5 mailing lists that maybe are appropriate for that question, remark, or problem. And that includes developers as well. So maybe someone's doing development work for MapKnitter. I might get an email saying, oh, I'm trying to do this, can you help me? And I might forward that to both the developer list, which I think is plots, or sorry, I don't know the list off the top of my head, but I would forward that to 2 different lists for the developers, but also for maybe the Mapnder people. So I think emailing web ad is a good default, but if you are really doing some deep developer stuff, you're stuck in code or you can't get something to run, definitely the developer list for Public Lab, the general developer list, is a great place to go, and you have a lot more eyes there. I think Jeff can talk subscriber numbers briefly if he wants.
Actually, maybe Liz could talk about that, because she does a lot of the list updating and so forth.
Hey, I'm sorry, I have to literally jump off right now, but in general, I also wanted to promote joining the web working group as the place to get started. If you don't want to take on a whole project, but you want to be supportive and use your skills, you know, join people like Brian and Jeff and me in the web working group. And I have to run right now, I'm sorry.
Well, to answer your question, the Plots Dev group has 92 members, which is a lot higher than it used to.
Is Plots Dev for, that's all Public Lab, right? That's not just the Plots 2 web server.
Yeah, that's everything.
Yeah. Okay. So that's good to make clear.
Yeah. All right. That's it from my end.
Hey, everyone.
Hey.
Maybe we can have a call, as was suggested earlier, on specific projects like Infogram or MapKnitter. That would be helpful for me, just kind of maybe a more developer-centric sort of thing. I don't know how others feel about that. I would be willing to join a call for that.
Sorry, Gerald, for what again? I think we missed the beginning part of what you said, or at least
we spoke earlier a little bit about having a call that was more specific for like Infogram or for MapKnitter to step through some of the issues and some of the maybe setup points. And I don't know if that's something more focused on developers or on just everyone, but that would be helpful for me. And I think meeting like this is good too. Maybe.
Yeah. So there's another function we can do through the OpenHour page is just to set up a call that's outside of OpenHour that's just based on a certain issue or topic, and that would be a great thing to do. I think is just to set up a follow-up call with anybody who's interested in walking through one of these. And maybe a couple people here in the web development group can put together what that might look like to try it out. And we'll send out a call just like we do for OpenHour to say, hey, we're going to have a special get-together and do this. And it's more specific and targeted.
Maybe we could put up
do something together online. Brian?
Maybe we could put up some polls for people to vote, like both time but also what they're interested in doing next, so we can prioritize a little bit.
Sure.
I also had Stevie, you and I did a meetup in New Orleans a while back, and I wonder if others have had luck in getting traction with developers at meetups, like local meetups.
I know that like GitHub hosts meetups. There's often like Ruby dev nights. Some of them are very platform oriented rather than specific application oriented. Different cities have these. Like I think the one I've heard of most is like Ruby or Python meetups, where it's at a bar and people just get to know each other, build a sort of a network of support of people who use the same software tools. But yeah, I'd be willing to do it.
Did you mean specifically like in person, like what we?
Like in New Orleans, every Tuesday night, there's it's really very free form, and it's very unstructured, and I think you can just show up. If something captivates the interest of those who are there, that's a way to get people interested. I mean, I just was kind of curious if others have had any luck in that sort of thing.
Actually, Justin just walked away, but when we were discussing how we can reach out, this was something Justin brought up, is having hacker sessions, as they like to be called, where people get together, pick a problem, work on it. Maybe they're not all working on the same problem. Maybe they're just bringing problems together. Oh, Justin's back. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and what your ideas were?
Sorry, so I heard you talking about hacker sessions.
Yeah, it was brought up, I think, by you. Maybe I'm misrecalling the idea of like getting people physically together to work on Public Lab, and hopefully that brings in some developers as well. Yeah,
so I mean, I think that could be really promising, maybe in a virtual way, like having people, like, you know, fixing a time and having a bunch of Public Lab developers just say, okay, we'll all be on video chat at this time and we'll all work on different projects. But if I'm working on MapKnitter and, you know, someone else is working on Spectral Workbench, and then we're all on video, and maybe you and Jeff are on video too, and someone has an issue, and they just kind of like ping Jeff or you right there, and so it's a kind of virtual like hacker hour or something. I don't see a physical kind of hacker time as being that useful for this community because we're so widely spread out. You might have been thinking of what I was saying about hack nights here in Chicago earlier. We have been really successful in moving forward various different projects at Chai Hack Night. The one I've been working on lately has been this Petco app. But our work has really been focused on this one Petco app, and I think that it would be difficult to kind of transition that group into working on other Public Lab products, you know, software tools, just because the folks at Chai Hack Night haven't used those tools, and they're not engaged with those tools.
I have a maybe propose. Let's try both. Let's, you know, grab a time and specific project that people are interested in, whether it's like a Spectral Workbench or MapKnitter. Maybe it's kind of hot right now, to do like a get-together download tour, and then have a follow-up session where people can get together online and work through a specific one or two or couple GitHub issues, and just sort of be together online working through some of these things. And Gerald, you got a +1 from Dan on the IRC chat, so maybe that good time for you could be that Tuesday New Orleans hour, because I'm pretty sure it's Dan Beavers, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, but you're both local down here in Louisiana, Mississippi.
Cool.
How would that sound to I guess all of you who are still on?
Yeah, I like
that two-part session.
I like the idea of formal and informal, where formal is maybe a tutorial, as Kate had brought up, and in fact that could be something that would make a lot of sense to edit down or just provide as a YouTube video later, right? So we do this live and then it's available later. That might be a good thing to do with these more formal, let's walk through this, and then take questions afterwards. But for an informal, like a hacking period, let's all just get together and work. Maybe, yeah, it'd be better to do that totally separate, not focus on any project, just focus on development itself. I like the idea of having both separate.
Anyone else have thoughts on that? Kate, what do you think?
Yeah, I think both those ideas sound great. I'd be particularly interested in MapKnitter. Would probably be something I would participate in.
Sounds good. Great.
I love the idea.
All right, does anybody have anything else else going on here that we'd like to get in before we close the call? Okay.
Don't be afraid to email us.
Don't be afraid to email. Great. Thanks, Brian. All right. Well, thank you all so much for coming in and joining. This is actually, I've been watching the numbers here. This has been one of our most popular calls, open hours, which is really exciting. So, yeah, there are friends out there, and I'm excited to have everybody in the same space for a moment, and also really excited to move forward with some of these ideas. So, thanks everybody for coming and for listening and supporting and contributing, and yeah, if not before the next open hour, we'll at least hope to see people again at the next open hour. So, but we'll schedule some follow-ups here. Sounds great. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.